A civil war that's been raging in Yemen for the past 3 years could soon be getting much more deadly. The conflicts between rebels backed by Iran and forces backed by Saudi Arabia, ultimately supplied by the United States. Because of aid shipments being blocked by the fighting, the United Nations says there's a massive risk of starvation. That's the backdrop for a local protest against the defense contractor Raytheon. Joining us is the coordinator for the Raytheon Anti-War Campaign, Paul Shannon. Thank you very much for being with us, Paul.
Thank you, Chris. Good to see you.
Start with the scariest thing here, this risk of starvation in Yemen. How big is this?
This is very big. The humanitarian organizations and the United Nations has declared that Yemen, not Syria right now, is the greatest human rights catastrophe going on the face of the earth. And Yemeni children are starving to death. We've seen a lot of publicity, rightfully so, about this killing of this Saudi journalist, Khashoggi. But I just want to start, actually, to orient us here by quoting a doctor in Yemen, Dr. Makia Mahdi. She says, "We are being crushed." She's in charge of a clinic dealing with kids starving to death in the southwestern part of Yemen. "We're surprised," she says, "the Khashoggi case is getting so much attention while millions of Yemeni children are suffering. Nobody gives a damn about them." And this has been the problem with the Yemen war. Most of us, of course, don't even know where Yemen is.
It's next to Saudi Arabia. We know that much.
It is. Yeah. And it's just an amazing horror going on there.
One figure I saw from the UN that 14 million people, if they're not actually going to starve to death, they're going to need serious aid, at least.
Yeah, I mean, they are starving now. If all the supplies get blocked by the Saudi bombing of Hodeidah, the major port there, then you will see massive numbers dying. But already lots and lots. We don't have any way of estimating how many, except from the eyewitness accounts of these kids, just skin and bones in these places. It's just a catastrophe. And of course, the worst thing is that we are working with the Saudis. It's not just a Saudi war, but the United States provides targeting information, intelligence information, and of course, the weapons. And that's where Raytheon comes in as one of the top 2 military contractors selling billions and billions of dollars of bombs and other weapons to the Saudis that are being used in Yemen.
If someone were to say, what does all this have to do with us here in the United States, what would you tell them?
Well, I'd even bring it a little bit closer to Massachusetts. If anything seems far away, given everything else going on in the country, the war in Yemen seems very far away. And yet, we are sitting right in the middle of a major institution connected to that war. This is our war in Massachusetts. If you consider providing the weapons for a war and the military advice for a war, which Raytheon does, this is our war. And therefore, there are 2 things. One is, because this war to a degree is being fought out of Massachusetts, we have a responsibility here to understand the war, to see the real dynamics. It would be nice if we had time to go into the actual history of this, which is quite different from the official history. And we have a responsibility to do what we can to pull ourselves out of that war, at least for us to stop participating in it. The second piece, of course, is just plain old common sense. This alliance we have with Saudi Arabia, is this really in the interests of either the people of Saudi Arabia or the people of the United States? What is really behind this alliance? Basically, Saudi Arabia isn't even a country. Saudi Arabia is a mob family with a flag that sits at the UN. And this is, people see this. We don't pay attention to it here, but people around the world know what Saudi Arabia is. And between the wars, their invasion of Bahrain, and now this thing in Yemen, their spread of the Wahhabi extremist ideology around the world through billions of dollars that it's spread all around the Muslim world, through its involvement in the United States in terms of funding colleges, in terms of the Clinton Foundation, all these, it just spreads its money around so that it undermines the ability of people that should be speaking out to speak out.
This is Being on News, and we're talking with Paul Shannon. Paul, part of the context here is that there is a threat from expansion of influence by Iran, whether in Yemen or over the border in Syria, which threatens Israel. So don't we have to keep an eye on that and do something about it too?
Well, Iran is not at war in Yemen. Iran is not bombing Yemen.
Not directly, but they are supporting.
Well, they may. The idea is that they supply some weapons. But Saudi Arabia is not part of Yemen. The Houthis that they're fighting are Yemenis. Saudi Arabia is another country, and that it has attacked this country. Yes, there are civil war dimensions to it, certainly, but there would be no war if it was not for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia pays all the mercenaries that it gets from Africa and other places to actually do the ground fighting, while the UAE and Saudi Arabia do the bombing from the air. This is a foreign invasion of another country. I think that's a more helpful framework to use. It's a historical question. We obviously don't get into it, but to see this to see the Houthis as an Iranian proxy is just totally inaccurate here.
Well, so far we've heard one of Trump's top aides, Pompeo, talk about getting a ceasefire. We have members of the congressional delegation from this state say we got to have a moratorium, maybe on arms shipments or something like that. Is that positive, or do we need something more than that?
Well, we're hoping that by putting pressure on U.S. military companies, in our case here, Raytheon, to stop this alliance that they have with Saudi Arabia. Raytheon brags of its 50-year alliance with the Saudis. They're opening up a subsidiary in Riyadh, right in Saudi Arabia, to help the Saudi military. It's not just the weapons sales, but we're hoping by focusing on that, it's such a clear-cut tragedy that will move Raytheon and the powers here towards some type of negotiated settlement that really allows for the self-determination of Yemen, though, not one that is a surrender of the forces opposing the Saudis.
And finally, how you're sending that message tonight?
Tonight we're having a rally. We've had a number of rallies at Raytheon facilities, mainly in Cambridge, and our message is very simple. Please call the CEO of Raytheon, urge him to do the right thing, to suspend and in long-term cut off these weapons sales. By doing this, the world will thank you. I know it will hurt to your bottom line for a little while, but really this is something that must be done. And we will keep on doing that. We will work the divestment of the mass pension plan from Raytheon, as well as churches and other institutions, until Raytheon stops collaborating, not just in the Yemen war, but collaborating with this very dangerous regime in Saudi Arabia that thinks nothing of killing people.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Paul Shannon from the Raytheon Anti-War Campaign.